So you sent over a really interesting set of articles this week. They all kind of revolved around understanding personality, right?
Mhm.
What makes us tick, why we click with some people, and, why others are more of a challenge.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you're digging into this partly because of maybe some new team dynamics at work,
Mhm.
trying to figure out how everyone operates.
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating and also, well, sometimes tricky. These readings focus on the Big Five model, which felt like a good place to start.
Ah, the big five.
Yeah.
Right. Openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Ocean, or I guess canoe, depending on how you remember it.
That's the one. It's a really widely accepted way to think about the basic building blocks of personality,
Yeah.
how we tend to act, feel, think.
Okay, so for the deep dive, we're going to unpack those five. Look at what they mean based on, well, current psychology and the sources you shared.
Precisely. The mission is to explore each one, kind of look at the spectrum involved, and importantly, understand the real world side of it. What does it actually mean day to day, especially maybe in a team context like yours?
Got it. Sounds like a plan. Where should we start? Openness.
Let's do it. Openness to experience. So, based on the readings, what's the core feeling you got for this trait?
Um, it seems to be about curiosity, creativity, that sort of willingness to try new things, explore new ideas,
Yeah.
the whole thinking outside the box idea.
Yeah, that's a great summary. It captures that exploratory
But
drive.
it's not just like you have it or you don't, right? It's more of a skill.
Exactly. It's a spectrum. On one end, you've got folks who prefer routine. They're comfortable with the familiar, maybe more practical, concrete thinkers.
Right.
And on the other end, you find people who are really drawn to novelty, the imaginative, the unconventional. They enjoy abstract ideas, new experiences.
Right. So if you're looking at your team, someone high in openness,
Yeah.
what might that look like in practice?
Well, they might be the ones always suggesting new ways to tackle a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe eager to learn a new skill or experiment with a different approach.
The early adopters of new tech, perhaps.
Could be, yeah. The readings mention they often enjoy variety, adapt well to change. They might be drawn to things like art, philosophy, or research areas needing abstract thought. They like diverse perspectives.
Interesting. And one article mentioned they might be less likely to feel lonely. Is that linked to the curiosity aspect?
That's a fascinating point from the sources, yeah. Possibly because that curiosity leads them to connect with more varied people and ideas, maybe broadening their social world.
Huh. Okay, so what about the other end? Someone lower in openness on that same team, how might they show up?
They might be your anchors to tried and tested methods. They often value stability and efficiency through established procedures.
Yeah.
They might be a bit hesitant about big, sudden changes.
So not necessarily resistant just for the sake of it, but more cautious, preferring proof that something new actually works better.
Exactly. It's more about practicality and, sticking with what's reliable. And like one source pointed out, big differences in openness on a team can sometimes cause a bit of, well, friction when big changes are proposed.
Yeah, I can see that. Makes sense.
Oh,
So the real world impact, especially at work.
well, high openness often fuels innovation, right?
Yeah.
Creative problem solving.
Yeah.
That's huge. Adaptability, too, which is key nowadays.
But are there downsides?
Potentially. One article hinted that while great at generating ideas, sometimes highly open individuals might struggle with the more routine follow-through. And maybe a team that's all about novelty might lose some efficiency on the day-to-day stuff.
Ah, the balance again. It's not just about having more, being better. Okay, interesting. Let's move to the next one. Conscientiousness. This feels, I don't know, more straightforward, like being organized, reliable.
That's definitely part of it, yeah. At its core, it's about self-discipline, organization, being goal-oriented. Impulse control is a big piece, too.
Impulse control. How so?
Well, it's about thinking before acting, planning things out, resisting distractions to stay on task. The spectrum runs from people who are maybe more impulsive and less structured to those who are super disciplined, careful, detail-oriented.
Okay.
Yeah.
So someone high in conscientiousness on the team, what behaviors stand out?
These are often the planners, the list makers, very reliable, persistent. They usually hit deadlines. Their work is thorough. They follow through on commitments.
Dependable.
Very dependable. Achievement striving, thoughtful, careful. Several sources highlighted this trait as probably the strongest single predictor of job performance across many different roles. Their reliability just leads to consistent results.
Wow, strongest predictor. That's significant. And the other end of the spectrum. Lower conscientiousness.
They might be more spontaneous, maybe more flexible, sometimes less organized, perhaps prone to procrastination. They might find structured environments a bit stifling.
So maybe more adaptable in some ways, but potentially less consistent with tasks and deadlines.
That can be the trade-off, yeah. They might dislike rigid rules, prefer a more fluid approach. This can sometimes frustrate team members who rely more on, predictability and clear plans.
Right. It sounds like this trait is really fundamental for just getting things done, both individually and as a team. What about outside of work?
Absolutely. The readings connected to all sorts of positive outcomes, better academic results, better financial planning and stability, likely because of that persistence and goal focus.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, some research even links it to better health and longevity. Maybe because conscientious people are more likely to stick to healthy routines, doctor's appointments, things like that.
Huh. And relationships.
Yeah, they tend to be seen as reliable partners, which generally leads to more stable, successful long-term relationships. Lower divorce rates, too, according to some studies mentioned.
It really does sound foundational. Okay, let's shift gears. Extraversion. This one's often just boiled down to outgoing, but it's more nuanced, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yes, sociability is key, but it's also about where you draw your energy from. Do social interactions energize you or drain you? It also includes assertiveness, comfort in social settings.
The energy source. That's the
Yeah.
key distinction often missed. So the spectrum is,
It goes from reserved, maybe more internally focused individuals, introverts, to the highly sociable, action-oriented extroverts.
so back to the team scenario, the high extroverts.
They're likely the ones striking up conversations, maybe organizing social things. They tend to thrive in group settings, enjoy brainstorming aloud, feel energized by collaboration.
Comfortable speaking up in meetings, maybe taking the lead.
Often, yes. They usually have a wide social circle, enjoy being around people. The sources suggest they often do well in roles requiring lots of interaction, sales, management, presenting. They're often assertive, comfortable voicing opinions.
Okay. And the introverts on the team. How do they operate differently? It's not just shyness, right?
Crucially, no. Shyness is more about fear of social judgment. Introversion is about energy. Introverts often prefer quieter settings, maybe one-on-one interactions over big groups. They might feel quite drained after a lot of socializing.
So they'd recharge differently.
Exactly. They often recharge through alone time, reflection. They can be very focused, great listeners, and often prefer to think things through before speaking. They might excel at tasks needing deep concentration.
That's such an important point for managers, right? Not mistaking quietness for lack of engagement or ideas.
Absolutely. Introverts bring huge strengths, depth, focus, careful consideration. It's about creating space for both styles to contribute effectively.
Makes sense. So broader impact of extroversion. You mentioned leadership and sales.
Yeah, often linked to leadership emergence, being noticed as a potential leader. Also strongly correlated with subjective well-being, like feeling happy and satisfied with life. Maybe because of their larger social networks and engagement.
Any potential downsides mentioned?
Well, sometimes the tendency to talk more can mean they might be perceived as less effective listeners. And in some leadership roles, extreme extroversion might not always be ideal if it overshadows quieter team members.
Interesting. Balance again. Okay, next up, agreeableness. This sounds like, well, being agreeable, getting along.
Pretty much. It's about cooperation, empathy, concern for others, maintaining social harmony, how we generally approach our interactions.
In the spectrum here.
Goes from people who are maybe more competitive, skeptical, potentially more challenging, to those who are very trusting, helpful, compassionate, and cooperative. It's about your orientation towards others, more me-focused or more we-focused.
So a highly agreeable person on the team. What's their likely contribution?
They're often the glue, the peacemakers, the team players, very supportive, cooperative, empathetic. They care about others' feelings, try to find common ground, avoid conflict.
Helpful, kind, polite.
Exactly. Often well-liked, trustworthy. They prioritize group harmony, are quick to help out. They value fairness and equality.
And someone lower in agreeableness. How might they operate within the group?
They might be more assertive about their own opinions, maybe more skeptical of others' motives, more competitive, perhaps. They might challenge ideas more directly, which isn't always bad. It can spur debate.
It could also lead to conflict.
It could, yeah. They might be seen as less warm, maybe more blunt or demanding, less focused on keeping everyone happy, more focused on, say, the task or their own perspective. Words like critical or stubborn might sometimes apply.
So finding a mix on the team might be key. You need people to push back sometimes, but also people to smooth things over.
Ideally, yes. Too much agreeableness might lead to avoiding necessary conflict or difficult decisions. Too little can obviously create a hostile environment.
Right, and the wider impact of agreeableness. Relationships seem obvious.
Hugely important for relationship satisfaction, yeah.
Yeah.
Stable partnerships. Interestingly, some sources linked low agreeableness to potential health problems, maybe via increased stress from conflict.
Yeah.
And on the positive side, highly agreeable people are often more involved in volunteering, community activities, that pro-social behavior aspect.
Makes sense. Okay, last one of the big five. Neuroticism. This is sometimes framed as emotional stability, right? The opposite end.
Exactly. Neuroticism refers to the tendency to experience negative emotions, things like anxiety, worry, sadness, anger. So high neuroticism means you're more prone to those feelings, while low neuroticism means you're generally more emotionally stable and resilient.
So it's about emotional volatility versus calmness.
That's a good way to put it, how reactive you are emotionally to stress and challenges.
Okay, so in the workplace, high neuroticism, what might that look like?
Someone high in neuroticism might worry more about deadlines, potential failures, or what others think. They might react more strongly to stressful situations, perhaps seem more irritable or anxious.
More sensitive to feedback, maybe?
Yes, potentially more sensitive. They might experience more mood swings, feel insecure more often. They might focus more on risks or potential downsides.
And low neuroticism, the emotionally stable end.
These individuals tend to be calmer, more resilient. They handle stress relatively well, don't worry excessively. They're generally more confident, secure, and less easily upset.
Laid back, perhaps.
Often described that way, yeah. Emotionally stable, bounce back from setbacks more easily, maintain a more even keel emotionally speaking.
This sounds like it has massive implications for well-being and work.
It really does. High neuroticism is a known risk factor for things like anxiety disorders and depression, as the readings likely pointed out. It can impact job satisfaction, lead to more stress, higher burnout risk.
That sounds challenging.
Yeah.
Are there any upsides or nuances?
Interestingly, yes. Some research suggests that while challenging, people higher in neuroticism might also be more aware of threats or problems, maybe more empathetic because they experience emotions strongly. Some links to creativity have also been suggested, perhaps stemming from that deeper processing of experiences.
That's a really important point.
Hmm.
Not to just label it as bad. Every trait has complexities.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember, as we've kind of touched on with all of these, that we're all a blend. Nobody is just one trait.
Right. It's the unique combination of where we fall on all five spectrums
Yeah.
that makes up our personality.
Precisely. The interplay between them is key. Someone might be, say, highly conscientious, but also highly neurotic, very driven, but also very worried about performance.
Or maybe introverted, but highly agreeable, quiet, but very focused on others' well-being.
Exactly. Infinite combinations.
And these traits, while relatively stable, aren't completely fixed, are they? The sources mentioned change over time.
That's right. There's evidence that personality can shift gradually, especially across the lifespan. People tend, on average, to become a bit more agreeable, conscientious, and emotionally stable as they get older.
Life experiences shape us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Major life events or work environments, relationships, they can all nudge these traits slightly over time. And of course, there's the whole nature versus nurture question.
Yeah, the readings mentioned genetics play a big role, like maybe around 50% heritable.
That's the figure often cited, yes.
Yeah.
So a strong genetic component, but our environment, upbringing, culture, experiences shapes how those genetic predispositions actually play out.
And culture's a big one, especially thinking about diverse teams. The big five holds up across cultures mostly, but the expression can differ, right?
Hugely important point. While the basic structure seems quite universal, how traits are expressed, what's valued, that varies. Western cultures might have an extraversion bias, for example.
And some cultures might have personality dimensions not perfectly captured by the big five.
Exactly. Research in some East Asian cultures, for instance, suggests additional factors related to interpersonal relatedness might be important. And the Hexac model adds honesty-humility, which some argue is missing from the big five.
So it's a powerful model, but maybe not the complete picture. We should acknowledge limitations.
Definitely. Critics sometimes argue it oversimplifies things. Plus, relying on self-reports has issues people might answer in socially desirable ways.
And the predictive power might vary depending on the context or culture.
True. And there are ethical concerns, like using personality tests in hiring, especially if they disadvantage certain groups or overlap with mental health conditions. We need to be careful.
Good points. But despite those caveats, understanding the big five seems really useful, like for your initial goal of understanding your team better.
Absolutely. It gives you a language, a framework. It helps you appreciate differences, maybe anticipate how someone might react or what motivates them.
Like knowing conscientiousness predicts job performance generally, or agreeableness is good for teamwork.
Right. Or how extroversion might link to leadership potential, or neuroticism to stress management needs. It can inform how you build teams, communicate, delegate tasks.
So bringing it full circle back to your team,
Mm.
thinking about these five dimensions, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, it provides a lens, doesn't it?
It really does. A way to maybe understand puzzling behaviors, appreciate different strengths, and hopefully foster better collaboration and empathy.
It's not about putting people in boxes, but understanding their tendencies.
Exactly, understanding the landscape of personalities you're working with.
So a final thought perhaps for you and for everyone listening.
Hmm.
Considering these five dimensions, what's maybe one aspect of your own personality or something you've observed in others that you'd like to understand a bit better now? And how might that new understanding, that insight, potentially change how you interact or make decisions going forward?
That's a great reflective question, using this knowledge not just to analyze, but to adapt and connect better.
Definitely something to think about.
Hmm.
Hopefully this deep dive has provided some useful food for thought on the fascinating world of personality.